like, bro, yeah, she got a kid. Look at his back. Oh my god. Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to another reaction. Today, we're reacting to the mundane horror of American slavery. Yes. I mean, we don't necessarily always talk about the things that slaves may have endured or had to deal with. I mean, it's not nothing that we went into deeply in school. I don't know why you wouldn't. I mean,
probably not to like show like all the bad stuff. So when they just broaden it, so they don't have to really get into like deep.
Yeah, they don't want to build
like
that.
Topic.
Yeah, they don't want to build that. What's that? What's that word? Resentment. Perhaps they're afraid they can build resentment within the community, or they're just afraid to talk about the actual implications of slavery throughout that time. 200 years of people being whipped and used as actual cattle. You weren't considered anything more than, like, you were literally just property. Like how I own these headphones, my AirPods, or a hammer. That's what you were.
Go sell them down ninja.
Yeah, you were replaceable. You were a part. You were a cog in a machine.
They were like swap slaves.
And then when slavery ended, you see like slave masters, like they're surprised that their slaves want to leave. They're like, wait, I thought, what's going on here?
I thought everybody was okay.
No, you can't take any human being and expect them to want to be forcefully held in a system where they're being.
And they were okay for their situation, but no, I feel like they would never be like okay, just not being free.
You know, but we want to see what this guy has to say. I never heard of this guy's channel before. I don't know how to say his name, but yeah, if you want to see what this guy has to say, make sure that like button, subscribe, and share to reach 10K subscribers. We're gonna hop right into it.
They are deceived, who flatter themselves that the ignorant and debased slave has no conception of the magnitude of his wrongs. They are deceived who imagine that he arises from his knees, with back lacerated and bleeding, cherishing only a spirit of meekness and forgiveness. A day may come, it will come, if his prayer is heard, a terrible day of vengeance, when the master in his turn will cry in vain for mercy. Powerful words from my old friend Solomon Northup in his memoir, 12 Years a Slave.
That movie is wild.
You know, I had a thought when I was watching El Camino, the new Breaking Bad movie. Specifically, the scene where Todd Alquist goes to visit Jesse Pinkman in his cell. Jesse's been imprisoned by these neo-Nazis and forced to cook meth for them.
The guy on the cable keeps calling for rain. What do you think? I don't know.
Oh, don't tell him, man.
40% chance yesterday, 60% today.
There are more of these flashback scenes that show the neo-Nazis abusing Jesse in all sorts of horrible and extreme ways, but this scene really stood out to me as being especially creepy. The contrast between the banality of the conversation and the sheer fucked upness of the situation is almost comical. In Todd's mind, he's being kind to Jesse, but at the end of the day, of course, Jesse is his slave. This summer, when I criticized the movie Gods and Generals for being lost cause propaganda, many commenters rightly pointed out that my criticisms were not new. People were saying this stuff when the movie first came out. And at that time, Ron Maxwell, the director, actually responded to these claims in an article. Here's what he had to say about his portrayal of American slavery. This film, perhaps for the first time, captures the perniciousness of the institution of slavery. In Gods and Generals, we meet two Afro-Virginians who, despite being treated with respect and even love by their white masters, still have no confusion whatsoever about their desire to be free. Who among us would want to live in slavery, no matter how benign the immediate situation? This unusual cinematic treatment, though historically more typical of the Tidewater and Shenandoah Valley small-town relationships among blacks and whites during the war, was misinterpreted by these critics as glossing over slavery. Where were the floggings, the rapes, the chains? They obviously missed the point. There are many problems with that quote and the whole article generally, and I'll link to the full thing down below in the description if you're interested in checking it out. But my point in bringing it up is not to turn Maxwell into a punching bag again. My point here is that he is actually kind of right about one thing. The floggings, the rapes, the chains, this was not part of the day-to-day life of the majority of American slaves. The day-to-day reality was far less extreme, but just as horrifying in a lot of ways. The phrase, "the banality of evil," comes to mind, coined by a Jewish author to describe Adolf Eichmann, one of the primary architects of the Holocaust, during his trial in Jerusalem in the 60s, when he maintained, up until they hung him, that he was just doing his job and following orders. American masters did not treat their slaves with respect and even love. They certainly thought they did, but you didn't have to be John Brown to realize that it was all a delusion. It came from this twisted sense of paternalistic responsibility that was entirely self-serving. There's a famous quote from Robert E. Lee, where he describes slavery as a moral and political evil. But you don't often hear that he goes on to say in that same letter that the blacks are immeasurably better off here than in Africa, morally, socially, and physically. The painful discipline they are undergoing is necessary for their instruction as a race, and I hope will prepare and lead them to better things. How long their subjugation may be necessary is known and ordered by a wise, merciful providence. When masters did treat their slaves well, truly well, by any standard, both then and now, of moral enlightenment, it was so staggeringly rare that it's barely even worth mentioning. Stonewall Jackson's wife, Anna, in her memoirs, described her late husband as a very kind master. But he was still the master, and as such, saw fit occasionally to discipline his slaves. Here's one disciplinary tactic that Anna says that Stonewall used. When a servant left a room without closing the door, he would wait until he had reached the kitchen, and then call him back to shut it, thereby giving him extra trouble, which generally ensured his remembrance the next time. It may seem like a small thing, but in my opinion, this quote really captures the banality of Stonewall Jackson's evil. Imagine for a second a situation in your own life where you don't have that much personal agency. This might be an easier mental exercise for some of us than others, but it could be at work or at school, just anywhere where you don't have.
It must be that constant benign stress or any little small thing you do would lead to ultimate retaliation. That's just the only reason why these slaves were any somewhat kind to their masters or anything like that. They just feared the retaliation. I mean, you're being nice to me right now, but how nice can you be to me? How mean can you be? I mean when you talk about the reality of evil, when you're in a setting for that long, and you're perceived as the greater being, the greater example of humanity, and then you have the slave who's catalytic, uneducated. You heard the one guy said almost unable to take care for themselves. It's almost like a slavery is a way to build character. I don't know what the hell that must be, but
they had no choice. They just had to make good of their situation. That's why some felt like that's why the masters felt like they were cool with it. Or okay, because they were just so joyous knowing what they had to do. But yeah, man, that was just because they had to do.
Yeah, that's just what they had to do.
Have that much control. Your boss wants you to do your job a certain way. Your teacher wants that assignment in by Wednesday, and oh, by the way, it has to be double-spaced. The good news is that in our lives, at least here in the developed world, when your shift ends, when the bell rings, you're back in control. Free to go to the bar and vent to your friends about your idiot boss and all the crap you had to go through at work. Even in the most benevolent of circumstances, American slaves never had that. Take that feeling of a lack of agency and control, and imagine that you have it every moment of every day, that you were born with it, and that you'll die with it. Then you'll have some tiny inkling of what it might have been like to be an American slave.
I think it'll just show the strength these people had that they've even been able to adhere for such things for so long. And I can't even imagine myself in a situation like that, or because even little small things here that in my life, which I may feel like are uncomfortable for me, I can't even imagine having to go out and pick 60 pounds of cotton. If I don't get it 60 pounds every day, I gotta think about I might get 10 lashings in my back. My fucking skin's gonna be falling off my back. Accidentally crack an egg.
Take one of your fingers.
Take one of your fingers. Oh my God.
It was just a different time. There was nothing you could do about it. Some people live.
I wouldn't run away.
Yeah, people live slaves and dad slaves, like for a long time.
Only thing you could do was run away, and that's not easy. I mean, you're running through entire states. This is before like the United States was
They
necessarily
didn't even like hack. Like,
yes, yeah, you're running through woods and ain't no roads and
right, they're not chopping down trees.
ain't
like
no
that.
forward. There wasn't
They
even
got no
cars at that
machines for
point.
that.
Yeah, they got horses and chariots still.
A dense forest, yeah, all these like bugs and animals and big animals there, like
Then they have beasts that they put out on you to hunt you. The slave dogs that they were. Oh no, man, I don't know.
they're coming for blood.
But it definitely attests to how strong they were mentally, and how they were able to sustain that living for so long. I don't know. Maybe if it would have, I don't necessarily know if it could have turned it how it's turned into Haiti, because that was a smaller white population controlling a predominantly black population on that island. The way slavery was set up in the United States, I don't think that the slaves would necessarily be able to rebel and then be able to carry on with, hacking out land for themselves. They would have get annihilated by the South military. Let us know if you want to see more of these more hard-hitting topics. We want to be able to explore things like this. It's not always this funny stuff on the channel. We want to be able to see these serious things. But let us know if you want to see more down in the comments. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share. See you next time. Peace.
Da 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 da.